Thanks, Jackie. And thanks for everyone for being here with us to spend a little time with us to talk about not just UK Innovate, but to actually meet our UK Innovate team that has been expanding recently, developing our plans and strategies to really build out and establish this innovation and entrepreneurship enterprise within UK research. It's an exciting time for us. If some of you may recall or you may know that UK Innovate was a newly developed umbrella for innovation and entrepreneurship within UK research about a year ago. And so it's been, we're coming up on about the year's timeline of development and launch of UK Innovate. And we're excited to introduce two of our new UK Innovate leaders, Landon Borders and Christine Wilds. And they're going to talk to you about two new growth areas within UK Innovate, innovation training specifically, and what we call UK Innovation Connect for industry partnering. And we'll get to those subsequently. First, I'm going to spend a little time talking about the why we did this, why we've grown these specific growth areas for UK Innovate, and what it means for UK and our entire research enterprise, in effect, to make us most impactful, most competitive in a changing and evolving research landscape, and why that's going to really ultimately bear well for UK and our research community. So why UK Innovate? The question or the answer to this question really gets us to where we started, and that was first with growth of our Office of Technology Commercialization. We were building out our capacity to effectuate impact from research through commercialization, specifically for the 4 years or so preceding the launch of UK Innovate in 2021. Here you can just see some of the numbers where we grew our metrics for commercialization activity in number of inventions, patents, filings, licenses, and transactions around commercialization that were executed on an annual basis, startups formed, and of course, revenue derivation from those activities. So we grew that activity. And of course, you can't grow activity like that without growing your capacity to do those things. So this slide here, while looking quite messy on a screen with this many boxes, this screen only had 6 boxes on it when we started building OTC, because we needed talented personnel that really understood partnerships and licensing and intellectual property capture and new venture creation and entrepreneurship education. And so these boxes represent that capacity growth, that talent growth for our Office of Technology Commercialization. And of course, you can't grow a team without having capital to grow a team. And so part of our growth strategy for the Office of Technology Commercialization specifically, and now UK Innovate, was through grant mechanisms. We've been fortunate to be awarded a number of both federal and state grants that has allowed us to grow this capacity and to lead the state and the region in commercialization endeavors. You can see here we have grants from NIH, from the EDA, and from our Commonwealth of Kentucky as well, that have allowed us to build programs, education initiatives, and then tech transfer capacity to really serve our faculty and our UK technologies in the way that we knew that they needed to be served. One great example is our build out of Launch Blue, which was initiated through a grant from the EDA through their Venture Challenge program. That has allowed us to build what is now a premier pre-accelerator and accelerator program for Kentucky and regional and national stage startups. It's an exciting time for Launch Blue as we grow its capacity and what it can do for our UK research impact potential, as an example of the type of capacity and talent that we've been able to grow with these funds. So we've grown the team, we've grown our metrics, we've grown in our ability to fund those mechanisms. But none of that happens if we don't have a very vibrant research institution and research enterprise. And we know that research work creates economic impact. The stats here, specifically from 2020, so a couple of years old now, is from a research impact report that was published that just generally shows some of the types of impact from the research enterprise we have here at the University of Kentucky, the job creation, both here in Fayette County and then across Kentucky, the labor income develops, and then just this total economic impact from the ability to recruit companies, to partner with those institutions, of course, create jobs both in and out of research. So we know that there's enormous economic impact potential when we focus on research impact and growing our research enterprise. Also, if we extrapolate the view from that single year to where UK research has been and where it's headed, we can kind of get the picture of the need for an investment in something like UK Innovate, because our overall research infrastructure has been growing at an enormous clip. We have about a 10% compound annual growth rate in our research awards and research expenditures over the past 5 or so years, capped off by a 25% increase in 2019, and then continued growth up until this past year. And we're expecting that growth to continue. And so when we see our research enterprise growing this way, we know that we also need to invest in the infrastructure that effectuates impact and partnership to allow us to continue that growth. So the picture here is even bigger than that, though. What we're looking at beyond just our own campus and our local research ecosystem is an evolving innovation ecosystem and an evolving federal research funding ecosystem. So let me just take a few minutes to talk about that and why that plays into our decision of how we chose the growth areas that we're investing in for UK Innovate. I love to show this slide. This is actually a slide that I use in the course that I teach to law students and MBA students here at UK to show them the growth of our innovation economy here in the United States. Simply put, the top red line here, the squiggle red line you see, is patent filings relative to GDP. The bottom red line, the darker red line, is GDP growth over the past 35, 40 years. What that tells us, right, is that patent filings are exponentially more important to GDP than it ever has been before, as you see the widening gap and the increased growth rate of patent filings to GDP relative to GDP. But if you juxtapose that against the bar graph behind it, which is one of my favorite graphs to show anyone that needs to see at a high level how important research and development and innovation is to our United States economy, this shows that there's been a complete inverse in how our corporate structures, our corporate innovation, our innovative companies are made up. In 1975, only 17% of our S&P 500, our largest corporate entities here in the United States, only 17% of those companies were made up of intangible assets, including patented technologies, know-how, goodwill and reputation tied to innovation and R&D. That's done a complete inverse. And this is based on a study that I was a part of. And this study now carries through all the way to 2020 to show that we are now over 80% of the makeup of our innovation economy is based on innovation assets like patents and things that are commercialized in that manner. So when we juxtapose that again against where the evolution is happening in the way that research specifically happens here in the United States, we need to take a look at the overall makeup of R&D here in the US. You can see here that there's been a really interesting, and as we look at the components of R&D, of course, there's federally funded R&D, but then there's also lots of R&D that happens that is not federally funded. And you can see some of the stagnant level here of federally funded R&D relative to a growth of industry sponsored R&D. And that's not just industry sponsored at universities like ours, it's just total industry funded R&D. That is also one of the reasons, as I'll mention in a little bit, that we're seeing an evolution of thinking even on Capitol Hill from our federal government around how competitive are we actually being on a global scale in the way that our federal government is funding that type of R&D. So taking that in a little snapshot into that and zooming in, so to speak, into that R&D that is happening at universities. Something else to just note here that, while we have seen kind of a lag, as I mentioned, in the federal funding of that R&D, we've seen a growth in both industry and institutional funding. But not just sort of the source of funding, we're also seeing an evolution in what is being required to come out of that funding, what is being ingrained into our research cultures around what is expected from that research, which is effectually impact. We're looking for impact. And we know this because of the growth in programs since around 2015 or so, just in the past 5 to 8 years, the growth in the number of programs we're seeing from our federal government through the NSF now, through NIH, through EDA, through DoD, that are focused on translational research, that are focused on effectuating impact, creating startup companies and entrepreneurship, creating industry, intentionally creating industry partnership around proposed scopes of work. We're seeing a lot more of this. And so it's not even just sort of a differential between basic research and applied research. What we're talking about is actually adding an element to the stage of research to make sure that there is intentional use-inspired research that is going to be happening. And that's a buzzword in a language piece that we're seeing a lot more often now from agencies like the NSF and the NIH. So they're looking for proposals that are use-inspired. So we're basically planning for a large-scale investment in innovation from our federal government, from our entire research culture as R&D happens here in our country. And we know this just because of a few things that have happened most recently that have kind of helped us all turn this corner a bit. There's a post-pandemic spotlight on research and science now. We all know that. We also know that the federal government, as I mentioned, is now focused on making the largest investment in innovation infrastructure that it has in decades. And there's a conference going on right now between the Senate and the House around a bipartisan innovation act that would, for example, quadruple the size of the NSF. There's think tanks now that are focused on innovation capacity as a part of our national security conversation, right? About competitiveness and about the way that we're looking at the way research is done and effectuating impact from that work. And now, of course, as if you were a part of our hosting of the leadership from the new directorate from the NSF last week. The NSF launched its first new directorate in over 30 years called Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. It's a new directorate from the NSF, which really indicates a bit of a departure from traditional thinking around the way NSF funds research, not to sort of supersede its traditional approach and strategy, but to add to it a level of research impact culture and use-inspired research culture to the things that they fund. And we heard from that leadership last week. UK Research and UK Innovate hosted the leadership of NSF TIP, Dr. Gian Chandani, who talked to us about the reason for this new directorate and why this is a clear flag or indicia of the evolution, right, in the way research is happening. And here's, of course, just a visual of that talk that we hosted last week. And if there's any sort of clear piece of evidence that we need to see around where the federal government in the way that it's looking at funding research and the impact that it's trying to drive through that research, where that evolution is headed, this is a clear piece of evidence for this, and also why we're investing in UK Innovate in our new growth areas. So what we know, of course, you saw the economic impact locally and in the state from our research here at UK. What we also know is that technology transfer, industry partnerships, and commercialization and entrepreneurship drive incredible economic results and economic impact and societal social impact as well. Products, startups, these are all data points that are collected by Autumn. I'm currently the chair of the board of Autumn, which is a global association that of technology transfer professionals at over 300 universities globally that account for these statistics, that do this work. And I can tell you that as we, as Autumn, an association, monitors the trends in the way that universities are growing their capacity for research impact, UK Innovate is right on trend. We are at the cutting edge of the way that universities are investing now in making sure that we are forward thinking and at the tip of the spear of making sure that we are intentional about effectuating impact from our research through partnership, through innovation, understanding and knowledge training, through use-inspired activities for their research. Well, we also know that this is good for our faculty. There's some great empirical studies that show that doing this type of work by partnering with industry, for example, by committing to use-inspired research, to committing to customer discovery around research strategy, capturing intellectual property, investing in entrepreneurship culture, is good for the institution and its faculty themselves, and just the ways that it can be recognized through citations, and the way that it can be recognized as being top in their field, and their ability to actually see results from their research. There's plenty of empirical studies that show that this type of activity can actually vastly increase the way that research is recognized and can cause impact through scholarly activity. This is also regional for us. We are a land grant institution, a state entity with a clear mission to effectuate regional and statewide economic development through partnership. And what we often miss here in Kentucky is that we are actually unlike most other regions, in the fact that we are actually an innovation-centric point. We are the centerpiece in a 250-mile radius that encompasses 9 R1 research institutions, all within that 250-mile radius. And the stats you see here on an annual basis, these are outcomes from research at those institutions. Those stats can only be matched by places that are often described as innovation supercenters, like New York and Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. So we are truly at the centerpiece of a regional innovation ecosystem. And so we have a big part to play in that and in our regional strategies. So that's why we've committed to these investments. And we're going to introduce 2 of our new growth areas and the people that we have hired to lead those growth areas in Christine Wilds and Land and Borders. And so the investment we've made, we started with the Office of Technology Commercialization, and we're investing in 3 new focus areas. One is partnerships, industry partnerships that align themselves with regional innovation, economic development missions, priority industries of our state, and research priorities of the University of Kentucky. We've also invested in training for our faculty. This is all about culture building. We're going to be launching very soon, as Christine is going to introduce, an innovation training program to create almost micro certifications for our faculty to demonstrate that they have understanding and a clear knowledge base around research strategies that are set up for impact and are set up for entrepreneurial and commercialization opportunities and potential capture. And then finally, the third focus area that we've invested in is social innovation. Very important to us is focusing not just on the economic derivation, but also the social impact that can come from this work and the research that happens across our campus. We want to be more inclusive in the ways that we invite our faculty to work with us, to focus on entrepreneurial activities. And we're excited about these areas. So the 2 that we're going to talk more deeply about today are industry partnerships, or what we call UK Innovation Connect, and innovation training. And with that, I'm going to introduce Christine Wilds, who is our new Associate Director for Innovation Training for UK Innovate. And she's going to introduce what she's been developing over the past few months and that we are about to announce and avail itself to our faculty. Christine?
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it. Why don't you hit next real quick for me, please? So researchers right now are driven by curiosity. They want to know how the world works and why. So we created UK Innovate training to support that curiosity so we can increase the skills they already have and knowledge and experience so they can progress in their careers inside and outside. So we have innovative programs coming down the pipeline and entrepreneurial training. We have coaching and mentoring. All these programs will be there to create and expand upon impact. Next. So when we think about research and we think about impact, it actually is real change in the real world. And it is the drive to solve those problems at the intersection of knowledge and societal need, and there's many different kinds of impact. There's awareness, economic, social, policy, cultural, health. Impact isn't felt in just one spot. It takes hard work and persistence to create impact from research. Next, please. Now, there's no one size fits all approach to this, right? You could say, Christine, develop some classes here and develop some classes there. But when you want to take a more strategic approach of it, even if you're a fundamental scientist or applied researcher or a graduate student, right? In order to have impact, we need to take the tremendous knowledge from the university and break through that wall to the other side, to society, to show the transfer to society to gain that impact. So no matter how we do it, you go over, under, around, or through the wall, the knowledge from the university creates impact in society. Next, please. So here's what we have coming down the pipeline. Here's your sneak peek. We've created a micro certification. And you're probably saying, what's a certification and what's a micro certification? Well, they are short, stackable courses that you take to develop a specific skill set in a specific area. And they function as like continual learning or professional development, and you're working on certain skills at a certain period of time. Next, please. So what is it? How do we do it? Well, it's multimodal, it's short course curriculum, it's very inclusively designed in its delivery, and it is using experiential design theories. So there's a lot of work that went into designing the courses so they include specific levels of impact and implementation of where we need to go with entrepreneurship and innovation. Next, please. As a bird's eye view, and I know this is really hard to understand or kind of see this, but there's 3 levels to the micro certification. There's the main certification, there's impact, and there's implementation. And then there are the 10 courses that go into each area. And I'm going to explain it a little bit more, and the next slide will help us look at that. Next slide, please. So the micro certification has 2 units or 2 areas, impact innovation and impact implementation. So let's talk about the first section, impact innovation. Next, please. It is about impact literacy and understanding where our funders are going and what they're looking for in regards to our research and how we can create impact. It's about what changes we are making in society and who do they happen for, and how is that research going to be mobilized to get through to the other side, to society, over the wall. Who is involved? What are the purposes and what are the skills we need to get there? And then why? The big question is, why are we actually doing the research? Why are we doing this? What are the purposes, and what is the intended ethical consequences that could happen from our research as well? Next slide. Those workshops in the first layer for impact innovation work around exploring a growth mindset. So design thinking for entrepreneurship and innovation, where we go with our research. Building impact research. What does it look like? What are the requirements required for what our funders are looking at? Impact designing plan, engaging our stakeholders, not just the ones we think are going to be impacted, but possible industry contributors as well. And then finally, entrepreneurial research in the ecosystem. What does it look like today, and what is the future going to look like involved with moving forward? Those are our impact classes. Next. When we talk about the impact implementation, we have to also think about what we're including in those classes is provable benefit of the research. We're going to design and see how we can demonstrate, we measure, and how we can capture that impact of what we're doing here at the university in multiple areas and in multiple industries and multiple ways we design it. It is beyond academia. It's research felt in the real world, and it's happening because of what we are already doing here at the university. Next, please. So the first 5 classes were all about impact and what it is and how we're going to design and what we're going to do with it. But finally, the second 5 classes are about implementation. How are we going to do this? How are we going to take our ideas to enterprise if it's possible, if that's the pathway we can go with it? We're talking about entrepreneurship, startups, licensing. What directions do we need to go with the ideas that we have? Protecting our ideas before and after validation. It's important to protect your ideas even before you publish, or can we actually publish and still protect our ideas? Commercialization and the social entrepreneurship, I think, is vital for us, especially when we're doing impact on society. Who's writing the checks? Well, a lot of us think federally funded research is where we go to find our checks, but as you can see from Ian's charts, industry is really scaling with some of the funding they're doing into research. So developing partnerships is vitally important at this time. And then finally, the 5th class is about data in today's and tomorrow's companies. And it's important to not only understand research as a data from data sets, but how data can be used in impact and society moving forward. Next, please. As I talked about a little bit earlier, our courses are designed in Canvas, if I haven't mentioned it, and they're designed under the lens of experiential learning. So each of the workshops have 4 little modules that go along with it. The first one is about concepts. So we're connecting the concepts to what you already learned and moving forward from there. Then there's a little bit of experimentation, a little bit extra learning. We're going to try out a few things. And finally, we're going to have a reflective observation of what do we see, what happened, and what were the outcomes of the learning for those areas in general. Next, please. Our micro-certification is actually validated through an achievement recognition tracking system called Badger. And Badger is a well-known tracking system that is actually already embedded in Canvas, which is great for us. We don't have to do a little bit extra coding on the side to make things work together. So each of the 10 units have their own badge. The 2 individual bigger units, impact and implementation, have their own badge. And then the one main certification is the micro certification badge that comes out of it. Now, badges are not just a pretty little detail that says something, here's a great little design we can put on your resume for you, but there are actual competencies built into every badge, and it travels along digitally with the badge system. Next, please. So who's this for? Well, it's for the experienced researcher as well. You have a lot of skills already, but as we know, we're evolving and transitioning into a new society of research and where the impact is being created. It's for you to enhance your skills that you already have. It's for the future learners as well, that, doesn't really want to commit to a full program, but maybe just wants to increase some skills through a stackable learning system. And it's also for current students, graduates and postdocs, right? They could be pursuing their program and working on research, gaining these skills and the skill sets alongside of what they're doing will only enhance their marketability in the future. Next, please. How do you register or how do you get involved in this? Well, UK Innovate, our training website, will have, probably within about a month or so, a course catalog. The link is coming very soon. So those courses that you just saw, we just talked about, will be on our website. You'll be able to schedule yourself at the times that you want to be in class, whether the first class is in person or virtual, and then everything else is asynchronous after that. As you register for a course online and when you want to go, you'll be enrolled in the Canvas shell for that class. And then we monitor and take you through the system as we go. There's a lot of communication, you won't be left behind. And working in Canvas and the systems we already have will be much easier for the learners as we move forward. Next, please. Well, the university, we have a tremendous growing amount of research, and our leadership is very proud of where we are and what we're doing. So adding that to transferring our knowledge into and equaling a positive impact in our region's economy can only increase our reputation moving forward. Next, please. So impact, innovation, 2 different levels, 2 different actions, things we need to learn and things we need to move forward with. We can explore, we can develop, we can innovate, we can be entrepreneurs. We can do that for the university, for industry, and possibly even our government through policy. Those impacts are not only felt here, but the innovator feels those impacts, the university does, and so does society. There's a lot of benefits moving forward with what we're going to be learning. Next, please. So it's just the start of UK Innovate, our training classes that are coming forward. We have a really exciting masterclass we're going to be opening up more than likely in fall, paid experiential training for grads and postdocs, and customized workshops depending on what you need. Now, I'm Christine. I'm very diverse in innovation training and looking forward to working with you all. I'd like to hand it over to Landon, who's going to talk about Innovation Connect. Landon.
Thank you, Christine. I'm Landon Borders, and I'm the Executive Director of UK Innovation Connect. Next slide, Ian. I'd like to revisit some of the data that Ian shared with us earlier, but in a slightly different light. What you see here are a couple of pie charts representing the total R&D expenditures in higher education across the United States. On the left, you'll see those from 2010, and on the right, those from 2019. So great news, the pie charts are getting bigger, but there are certain elements here that I'd like to tease out for you. Next slide, please. This pie chart represents the rate of growth by which the contributing entities have changed over that course of time. So as you saw, we're growing as a higher education institution across the United States, but those agencies or the sources of that funding are not growing at the same rates. On the far left, the largest piece would be our federal government, and next to that, the non-federal government is not certainly not growing at the rate as what you see on the right here, which is coming from businesses, higher education institutes themselves, and nonprofit organizations. Next slide, please. Just taking revisiting this chart once again. So total UK research over since 2017 has grown at 41%, which is we're outpacing kind of the average rate of growth across the United States, which is great. But here at UK, businesses and nonprofit contributions are trending rather flat over these last 5 years. And you couple that with kind of what Ian mentioned earlier, the federal funding programs now are requiring collaborations with nonprofits, local government, industry, and academic institutions as a necessary requirement to obtain that funding is gaining a lot of momentum, as evidenced by a lot of the programs that were discussed on Friday with the head of the NSF tip. So next slide. That's where we come in to help. The Innovation Connect program is here to provide dedicated resources to support UK research and innovation outcomes that will impact corporate partners and promote economic development in our innovation ecosystem. You know, there are several ways and mechanisms to create a positive impact through partnerships in research and innovation. There's several listed here. Certainly some of the traditional industry-sponsored research projects are one means to do that, but also, as I just mentioned, there are several government-sponsored programs that require collaborations. There are licensing that we've talked about in previous conversations, ways to disseminate intellectual property from the university for widespread commercialization, and programs to promote pre-licensing options that I'll discuss later. You know, faculty and equipment access. There are tremendous amounts of research parks and technology hubs, you know, here at the university, but also elsewhere and across the United States, higher education. There's certainly labs and equipment here that are made available or can be made available to other industry partners. Further, faculty are often willing to consult with outside industry partners. Moving on here, there's a lot of opportunities in employee education. So I think there's a lot for folks to learn from us at the University of Kentucky about trends in technology, and then certainly complementary to that, there's a lot for faculty and staff here at the University of Kentucky to learn about problems that our industry and nonprofit partners are facing. There's opportunities for experiential learning programs for faculty and students in partnership with industry, and then certainly continuous learning and leadership development. And there's a host of programs here where we have industry partners that serve on our advisory boards, which also provides great leadership training for those individuals. And finally, through consortia. So there's a service and support here within UK Innovate for those endeavors, but also, you know, they're really effective when you combine resources across multiple sectors to solve, you know, the most challenging problems of industry in our state. And finally, consortia are great to provide insights into upcoming policies like some of those that Ian mentioned earlier. So there's a lot here, and what I want to talk about next is kind of where we will focus our resources over these coming months and years. Next slide, please. So working left to right, first, we really want to build long-term mutually beneficial relationships with corporate partners. And what I've found is that doing that kind of leads to outcomes that may or may not be evident in the onset of those partnerships. But certainly the more we invest early, that will certainly result in many different outcomes down the road. Second, we want to build a pipeline of opportunities that enhance the impact of UK intellectual property. Third is we want to make it easier to partner and work with UK research. And four is we want to really leverage our investments in new and enhanced facilities to bolster corporate academic partnerships. So I'm going to elaborate a bit on each of these four focus areas next, please. So there are programs available today, in fact, that lend themselves to this particular focus area. And first, there are those that increase transactional engagements with corporate partners. And a few examples here are standard testing agreements. Again, I mentioned a lot of the labs and equipment competencies that we have here at the University of Kentucky. But there's also industry extension projects, which is various projects that are made available to those willing to engage and interested in engaging with the College of Engineering here at the University of Kentucky. I mentioned earlier about consortia. There's a few examples here where UK Innovation Connect is involved in either supporting or developing new consortia, such as the Metals Innovation Initiative or most recently the AI Innovation Consortium. And there are certainly many more in the pipeline, and more to come soon. We also endeavor to create these immersive education, what we call career cycle programs for students, faculty, staff, and industry partners alike, to come up with innovative ways to collaborate and spend time either for industry here at the university or for faculty here to spend time in industry. Next slide, please. So a few examples here of how we're building a pipeline of IP opportunities. Available today and ongoing are forums that we will host here at UK Innovation Connect to either focus on industry problems or innovative funding mechanisms. So we've mentioned this a few times, but just last week, hosting the head of the NSF TIP Directorate here at the University of Kentucky. But we also endeavor to host reverse pitch events, really to showcase industry problems, and in doing so, to kind of socialize and solicit collaboration opportunities. So again, kind of looking at engaging on problem identification and collaborating on research as a result of that. Other future developments include partnering with the Cabinet of Economic Development to establish an onboarding program for new and existing businesses. So I'm sure many of you here have read in the news about so many new investments here in the state of Kentucky. And we want to be front of mind when those new businesses are considering Kentucky or have come to Kentucky and make an extension of UK made available to them. And then finally, we're looking to create active recruiting programs for any faculty interested in collaborating with industry partners. So we want to understand where faculty endeavor to engage with industry, and then provide sources to recruit individuals or businesses that are willing to collaborate in our research areas. Next slide, please. We will, as it relates to making it easier to work with UK research enterprise, we look to champion these federally funded research opportunities where these collaborations are necessary. And, a few of those that come to mind are the Convergence Accelerator with the NSF tip, and also just most recently, the Regional Innovation Engine, which was announced earlier this month. Finally, we look to leverage investments in new and enhanced facilities by creating an Innovate meeting space, UK Innovate meeting space for prospective research and innovation partners here. And really the intent here is to nurture and grow our R&D footprint, certainly here in Lexington and in Kentucky, and provide a pipeline of student talent to those businesses. Next slide, please. So there's a host of resources here for partners and prospective partners, including myself, Kim Sayer, who's our UKIC manager for engineering, Kim Klumper, who's director of business engagement here at the University of Kentucky, Jackie Green, who you met earlier today, the entire Office of Technology Commercialization, and UK Innovate teams. So now that I've had a chance to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we have in store here, I'd like to ask Jackie to make a poll available to those here in attendance to gain some of your insights. So the question is, which of these UK Innovation Connect services are you most interested in utilizing? And there's a list here of those that we spoke about earlier, from supporting transactional agreements to supporting research innovation consortia, immersive education programs, learning more about industry problems and funding opportunities, recruiting corporate partners, developing flexible partnerships, and corporate collaborative research spaces. So feel free to answer those questions and pick one that resonates with you. And we'll give it just a minute until we've had a chance to answer that. Okay. Jackie, if we've had some folks answer the poll question, would you want to share that with the group here? All right. Looks like we've got programs that resonate with just about everybody here, but maybe the most interest here is in recruiting corporate partners. So this is great feedback. And next slide, please. You know, if there's anything you'd like to discuss about the programs we discussed here earlier today, feel free to reach out to me at any time. My contact information's here on the screen. And at this point, I think we will shift gears and take some questions from the audience for Christine, Ian, or myself.
I have a question. It's Linda Dwaskin.
Hi, Linda.
Always have questions.
Love your questions, Linda.
Pushing the envelope, so to speak. So I really, you know, there's such a dearth of women innovators and patent holders and business owners and founders. So is there any thought towards, you know, pushing the envelope on training and maybe, you know, providing some, you know, reason to go forward for women to see that they can do this too? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? I didn't hear anything on that today.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Linda, and a good point. You know, equity and inclusion is a staple, frankly, of our UK Innovate mission statement and our core principles. It is a part of our outgrowth through social innovation as well. We did not highlight social innovation in that new growth area within the Office of Technology Commercialization here on this webinar. But that lays emphasis on, for example, our UK Women Innovators Network, or UK WIN. I don't have the date in front of me, but our next UK WIN conference is coming up. It's a series of conferences that we've had. Linda, I know you've been a speaker at it before. And we continue to look at opportunities to make sure that we are being as inclusive as possible and also raising up our successful women innovators. We have tons of them, frankly, here at UK that we can sort of raise up and show as great examples of of women that are not just innovators, but successful commercializers and entrepreneurs as well. We've had a number of fantastic women faculty entrepreneurs go through our UK Excel program. And we want that trend to increase as we go forward. Christine, I know that you and I have discussed on your innovation training programs around sort of EDI culture and including that in some of your curricula. Maybe you could touch on some of that.
Right. In fact, even Jackie and I, when she was helping doing some of the design behind the scenes, have made sure that all of our courses are ADA accessible as well as inclusive in design when it comes to images and verbology, I guess you want to say, or the content as well. It's interesting to focus on women because I had actually said 2 weeks ago, maybe we should have a focus, maybe mini workshops for just women in tech in focused areas. And so I'm more than happy to discuss with you moving forward. If you think it would be helpful, we can design something.
I personally think it would be great if you had a focus more than just the WIN meeting, which I totally enjoy, but a focus and training on women because, you know, they're just not as many percentage wise that come forward for this kind of an activity. And I don't know if it's intimidation or if it's just, I don't know what it is, but I think focusing on developing training for women who think they might want to go in this direction as a, you know, a separate thing to kind of bring, you know, increase the numbers like a targeted sort of approach, I think would be a good thing.
Linda, that's a really good point. I like the idea a lot. And Christine, you and I have an emphasis point to go touch on after this as a takeaway.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, for that question. And if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put those in chat. Ian, we have a question about how does this change with UK Innovate? Does it cause any issues with interactions or point of contact with the Office of Technology Commercialization for commercialization and IP protection?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Whoever asked that, I think I want to make it a point here that this does not supersede a relationship with the Office of Technology Commercialization. These are new growth areas for UK within UK research, industry partnering specifically for research and innovation training, specifically around research impact. But those things don't supersede, for example, the relationship with our Office of Technology Commercialization that still owns the commercialization process, the intellectual property protection process, and even our UXL entrepreneurship education program for faculty entrepreneurs to develop commercialization pathway. Those things are still intact, focused specifically on commercialization of our technologies. These are, if you look at sort of just the spectrum of services that we can now provide, UK Innovation Connect for industry partnering, as well as innovation training, could be thought of as being earlier in the process as we are looking at ways to form research strategy, to increase research capacity, and to increase innovation and commercialization culture. We're looking at helping our faculty develop know-how and understanding, and then equip them with potential partnerships that can make them more competitive for grant opportunities. I think one thing that Landon and I did not even touch on here is that you know, the industry partnering is not just to get industry to fund your research. There is now an increasing emphasis on grant proposal competitiveness to have industry or community members engaged and are supporting and are partnered on federal research grant proposals to make your grant proposals more competitive. So there's a lot of value points, right, that we're trying to build here, but none of those value points supersede or overlap or are instead of Office of Technology Commercialization value points, which are specifically for the commercialization process of intellectual property that's already been disclosed to our OTC office. Good question.
Thanks, Ian. Landon, we have a question for you. It says it looks like there are a lot of projects in the works, but it wasn't clear when some of these programs will be available. Do you have a roadmap to share?
Yeah, great question. Thank thank you for that. You're right. There are, we have a lot of great ideas, from, a lot of conversations we've had with faculty and staff and industry and others. It's in fact conversations like this and some of the polling that we've done here that will help us understand how to prioritize these things. And certainly look to partner with anyone here on this call or have any follow-up conversation to understand kind of how you see these programs and how we might prioritize them. I will say that that's something we look to make a little more clear in the coming months. And in fact, so as soon as next quarter, we look to have a roadmap that kind of indicates when some of these programs will be available, over the next year. So great question. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Landon. We have time for one more question. Christine, can you talk about what some of the objectives are for the micro certification program?
Sure. If you look at the two areas, impact and implementation, when you look at impact, we're really looking at understanding the evolution of the university researcher, right? Where are we going with that and what things do we need to look at, improve our skills on, and take advantage of moving forward? And then we look at the other side of implementation is really applying that design thinking methods to human-centered approach to research. Like, where are we going with it? How does it look? What are the opportunities that are available to us? So pretty much twofold: understanding and then being able to apply and move forward to increase our impact. Hopefully that answers it.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Ian, Landon, and Christine for all this wonderful information on the new resources through UK Innovate. Would like to thank everyone for attending. As a reminder, we will be posting the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, and we will send that out in an email as well to all registrants. We have a couple of upcoming events in June that we hope you will join us for. On June the 9th, our UK Entrepreneur Showcase. We will have 6 innovators from UK faculty and UK alumni entrepreneurs. A total of 6 of those will be presenting. That's on June the 9th, and you can register through the link on our website. Both UK Innovate and the Office of Technology Commercialization. And then please join us on June the 16th to learn about the other new focus area for UK Innovate, social innovation. Dr. Serenity Wright will be talking about what social innovation is at UK. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.